travel in the world to have a free-ranging discussion about the future of travel and the wonders of travel. Thank you for joining, Gary Arndt.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let's start. We've got a lot of people in the group that either travel, of course, is their passion, but many it's also their vocation in many ways. And when we were talking earlier, you said it's many people are not realizing just how bad this is for the industry economically and of course broadly for the economy as well. Talk about some of the effects on the industry, publications, tour destinations, the gamut.
Oh, this is the worst thing that's happened since, I don't know, World War II. Way worse than 9/11, way worse than the 2008 recession. And it's hit the travel and tourism industry uniquely hard, harder than anything else, because the whole, what everyone's going through is not traveling, right? That's the cure for this, is for people to stay at home. So it's just decimated hotels, cruise lines, airline, everything. I mean, everything across the board. And we're not going to have, when World War II ended, we had VE Day. There's not going to be a VV Day where we have victory over the virus and we're just done. This is going to be an unfolding of, probably a couple years. So even as travel restrictions are relaxed, and that's going to take, it's going to happen in phases. First, you can leave your house, then you're going to see some domestic flights come back and things like that. And there'll be more attractions which are open. Even a lot of the national parks right now have shut down. So you'll see these local, more domestic things open up before full-fledged global travel happens. And you're also going to see the virus is going to hit different places at different times. So right now, the United States and Spain, Italy, and a couple other countries have been hit the worst. But it could be that as things are getting better here, it could get worse somewhere else. Some countries in Asia or Africa, perhaps, and there could be multiple waves. So it's not just going to be, okay, we're done now, we can all travel. So we're going to have to really get used to the fact that there's going to be restrictions. And if you remember last month, as this was wrapping up, there were people in the Facebook group that were still like, oh yeah, I'm going to go to this place. And, and it doesn't matter if you get sick. It doesn't matter, because the restrictions put in place by airlines and governments and hotels and everything else just make, doing a lot of travel extremely untenable. It's just all these restrictions in place, and that's the problem.
And let's talk about also Lonely Planet, I think, is the first big name travel publication, travel media to make severe changes that I would imagine were probably in the works to a degree, but perhaps accelerated. Talk about them, the future of let's say print journalism of various kinds in travel.
They've all been screwed for a while. It's just, this is simply accelerating the process. Chopping down trees, putting ink on it, and then putting it in a truck to deliver information does not work in a world where you have instantaneous free communication. And what's been keeping a lot of magazines and newspapers alive is primarily, habit and culture. You got used to this, and so you kept doing it. But there's a generation of people. I was probably one of the first. I've never had a newspaper subscription in my life. Never, at any point, no matter where I lived.
I have three, so I'm very old-fashioned in habit.
But there's less and less people doing that. And I'm guessing of the people that do get a paper subscription, you're one of the youngest. Because I've seen
in my building here in Seattle, we temporarily had a guy in his 70s that also got one paper, and he moved to a different location, and so it's back to just me out of, I don't know how many units are here, 100.
And it's a classic case of the innovator's dilemma. I remember hearing Keith Bellows, who at the time was the editor-in-chief of National Geographic Traveler, talk. And he said, someone asked him, like, what are you doing for online? And this was years ago, like 2012, 13 or something. He says, well, we're doing stuff, but 90% of our revenue comes from print, which was true. Problem is 90% of his profits certainly weren't coming from print. If anything, it was, they may have been losing some money or just breaking even. And because they were forced to put so much of their effort into that, they kept their eye off the ball of doing stuff digitally. But more importantly, these print publications have huge overhead, right? You have offices in Manhattan, or in the case of National Geographic, Washington, D.C. You're paying top price for talent and for employees in some of the most expensive labor markets in the country. So you have this super high overhead, and that you need to keep things running just to keep the ship afloat. And once that goes away, now you're just a really expensive blog. Granted, they may have a better name and they may be,
Yeah.
better capitalized and whatnot, but fundamentally, you're running a website. You're subject to the same economics that someone working out of their apartment is. And one of the things I've talked to other people that run travel websites is that to get through this current crisis we're in, all we really have to do is survive. Just don't die. And so long as you don't have high overhead with employees and office space and all this other stuff, it should be much, much easier to do. And the example has always been used of the dinosaurs, and same's true here. All you have to do is survive, like the mice did after the asteroid hit, and come out of the other end, and you'll be the only one standing.
Speaking of that only one standing, I was talking with a marketing friend in a totally different industry, and he was debating, is this a time, because keywords are not going to the highest bidder compared to, say, a few months ago. Is this actually a time in some industries to plow money into internet advertising if you're trying to get to the top of the results, when you might get to the top of the results, but it doesn't convert? So how do you even structure weighing that kind of?
Putting something into advertising or putting into SEO? Because they're different.
SEO, yeah.
I mean, I suppose, but when are you going to see the return? The problem is no one's buying travel, right? I was in some Facebook groups with people in the travel industry. They had like a COVID, industry group, and the problem was you're seeing some discounts on hotels, say in New York, if you go and search for that right now, but they're not super discounts. So it's not like a $200 a night room is now going for $20. Right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's 25% off or something like that. And the reason is because the lack of demand has nothing to do with price. It has everything to do with the fact that people are afraid and they're stuck at home, sometimes legally, So it's not like they can get more business by offering a discount. There's simply no demand for travel right now. And so when you're going to see a return on your investment, I have no clue. Or what that's going to be. And a lot of the companies like Expedia, Booking.com, TripAdvisor, they basically killed their affiliate programs, or they sent their payout to something close to or at zero. So if you're a website and you're trying to get traffic and monetize it, well, no one's buying advertising right now. If you're a travel brand, they're saving their money. No one's giving affiliate commissions right now. So, how are you gonna make money off of it? You can't sell tours because people can't travel. What do you do?
Well, it seems like that switch was already made a few years ago, when it seemed that every travel blog converted to the how to be a travel blogger blog, and the answers 1, 2, and 3 were get Bluehost, get Bluehost, and get Bluehost. It seems like that's where the money was even a few years ago. So I guess that just accelerates to the how to get the FIRE movement, the how to get rich, those kind of things.
I think that the how to be a travel blogger thing is going to die, because I think a lot of the desire for that is going to go away, especially as this becomes not viable. And a lot of blogs are going to go under as well, because they can't make money off it anymore. So people, maybe they don't shut down the website, but they're not going to be actively doing it because they have to go get a job.
David asked, why did TripAdvisor stock went up recently, then down? Puzzling. I guess the puzzling part is the up, right?
Because people are always speculating. They hear something about, oh, we tried this drug and it was successful. And then everyone gets optimistic and they try to, buying, because all the travel stocks are low. So, I mean, I don't know. Who knows? It's the stock market.
Yeah, I feel like experienced travelers are maybe the least optimistic, but the most realistic, but most desiring to get back on the road.
Let me put it this way. If they announce tomorrow, hey, we have a vaccine for the coronavirus, solves everything, mission accomplished. We're done. The stocks that'll probably go up the most would be travel stocks because they went down the farthest, and they're the ones that have the most to gain. So any potential good news is going to affect travel stocks probably more than others at this point.
And what else? So one of there's a Facebook group, the business of blogging, and I to be honest, I look in and look for the posts that you've made. They're always
I'm not
well thought. You've pulled out.
Yeah.
So that's maybe why I haven't been getting those notifications. But let's go back, say 2 months ago, and what were some of the tips you've been giving about to people? I guess not in that format, but other places about SEO or tools. I've had the privilege of you giving me some SEO tips, resetting back to normal. Yeah.
If you look at what most travel blogs are doing, they're all writing the same article. You know, it's 15 things to do in Barcelona, 15 things to do in Rome, or whatever. And they're just pumping that out over and over and over. They're all writing the same article, and that is not sustainable. And, you know, there's an old rule that says if something can't go on forever, it won't. And I think that when I first started my website, so I sold my home 2007, set out to travel around the world, and my website was my social media. There was no Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook were just minor things at that point. And people literally followed me on the website and they commented on the website. And all that changed over time. They'll follow you on a different platform. And I think going back to developing a strong personal relationship with people is going to be the thing. And the way to really do that is going to be video. And that the monetization and way people were doing things with SEO will still be there, but it's just it's becoming such a commodity, literally a commodity, where everyone's just writing the same article. And there are sites that are successful churning it out with people that have never visited the place, with photos from Shutterstock. They're just stock photos, and they just do research on Wikipedia, and they're just a farm, and they crank the stuff out, and Google's letting them do that. And in that sort of environment, it's whoever throws the most money at it wins. Being an authority and being experienced means nothing. But if you can see people, like we're doing right now, then people can establish a personal relationship with you. They can hear the tone of your voice, and they get a much better idea as to your experience and your background, which, to give you an example, if you were to write an article about visiting every country in the world, which you've actually done, and someone who's really good at SEO wrote the same article, which one's going to rank higher? Probably.
I know SEO experts, they kick the crap out of me, certainly.
Yeah, not the person who actually did it. And that sucks. And that's just the reality of it right now. So, but if you were to, share a video or something where people can actually see you and you can tell your stories and share and give personal experiences and advice, that's a whole different ballgame.
So let's diagnose me a bit more then. I'll be the target for this. So I've been to every country in the world, and I've never had a good camera, but I've taken, let's say, incidental photos along the way that at least show where I've been, but certainly not quality from any kind of professional perspective. But video, I essentially have absolutely zero. I'm not going to restart 193 to get new videos. So what hope is there in video for somebody in my shoes?
Video does not have to be. This is the problem a lot of people make, is they're trying to all be Anthony Bourdain or the Travel Channel or National Geographic. And it doesn't have to be shot on location necessarily. It can be what we're doing right now, which is just talking and sharing advice and expertise. I was in this place. This is what I found. And maybe you just intersperse that with some still shots you took or some stuff that you find online. That's fine. That's really what people care about more than anything else. And it's far easier to create content doing that than it is to try to be on location and to do all the filming. When a lot of people don't know this, but when I started back in 2007, my original intent was to do video, not still photography. But the problem is, at the time in 2007, there were no solid state cameras, right? All of the cameras recorded everything to tape. So I had this really good consumer level camera, but I had this pack of, There were smaller tapes. They weren't VHS size, but there were still these tapes that I had everything. And so I'd carry them around. And I remember being in Fiji, sitting, at this table, trying to import the video into my my laptop and then trying to edit it. And I eventually said, F this. This is just not going to work. Not when you're island hopping through the Pacific trying to deal with videotape. So I just sort of gave it all up and started focusing on still photography. And I think I got pretty good at that. But now I want to go back and start doing more video. But the video I want to do is this kind of video where, you would explain something and give more detail. Because if you go to YouTube, again, one of the things that people search for is like, top 15 things to do in London. That's fine. But again, it's generically done by someone who, if they were there, wasn't paying attention and they haven't visited these places. And someone that has some experience and has actually been there and can tell you, okay, when you get out of this tube station, make sure to walk to the right, try to get here at this time of day. Like, if you visit the Vatican, one thing I learned the hard way is that, go after noon, because before noon, all the tour buses and the cruise ships hit the Vatican Museum at like the same time because the cruise ships have to get back. So I remember I was in a line that snaked around the Vatican to get in the museum. I had to leave my camera bag at the front. So I went back then like 3 hours later to get my bag and there was no line. The line was completely gone because it was all these people there in the morning. And I was like, oh, that's what I should have done. But just whatever advice you have firsthand, experience is going to go a long ways. Plus, interesting stories, anecdotes, whatever. That's really hard to convey in just some sort of list article on a website.
Yeah, the Vatican and those European museums, I'm just amazed. Like when I went there, then it wasn't planned in advance. The night before I looked at the Vatican Museum website, the regular ticket wasn't available, but the breakfast at the Vatican for a few euros more was. I bought it, and it was still for sale as I walked by. I mean, it was easily over 1,000 people snaking around the Vatican wall, waiting in line on their smartphones, doing stuff other than buying the ticket that was available to cut the line. And I just could not believe they're not having this thought of pull up the website and buy the ticket.
There's lots of dumb things like that. I think if you've traveled a lot, you've been able to figure it out, or that you can help people, and you don't need to be doing a video shoot on site necessarily to be able to put that kind of video together. And there's a lot of non-travel educational videos on YouTube that do really, really well that just put together, stock footage. So you could easily do a video on London or Rome or whatever using stock footage that's available for very low cost from some of these stock video sites where, who really gives a crap where the video footage that just pans around the inside of the Colosseum comes from? Doesn't really matter. So you could use that, but then put your take on the Colosseum and what to avoid. Those guys dressed as gladiators out front, it's run by the mafia. Don't talk to them. It's a scam. Get away from stuff like that.
Well, that gives me some hope because I when I look at YouTube and I look at the people successful, it's those I don't want to sound negative. It's those exaggerated titles. It's those strange face expressions and gestures, and it just
well,
you're holding the ice cream and like this, and I just
an element of
not
that.
me at all.
How you title something to grab people's attention. That's never going to go away because there's a sea of things out there, and you need to want to get someone's attention from that sea of things. But the actual content, it needs to be both informative and entertaining. And sometimes people fail in one or the other. They may be trying to be entertaining and cutesy and funny, but they don't. There's no reason why anyone should watch this, right? It's just there's nothing there. And on the other hand, there are people that can provide good information, but it's like they're reading off Wikipedia in a monotone voice, and that's not going to do well either. You need to find that sweet spot, and not a lot of people can do it.
So there's a question, what's the status of your podcast? So it was Global Travel Conspiracy, then it's The Well-Traveled Life. I still keep the feed in iTunes as hoping for it to reappear.
Okay. there's This Week in Travel that I've been doing for 10 years now, 11 years now. And we still do that. It's not every week in travel, but we do it every so often. The other podcast, the problem is I've kind of gotten bored talking to people about travel, if that makes sense.
Okay, we can end the interview here.
No, but like,
yeah.
this is fine, but okay, but trying to fill it every week and having something to talk about. Okay, this week we talk about this place, this week we talk about next place. And the difference with travel as opposed to other topic areas, politics, sports, celebrity gossip, something new happens all the time, brand new stuff, right? Technology, there's a new iPhone every year. We can speculate about it, and when it comes out, we can talk about it. There's podcasts and stuff that talk about TV shows. There's a new episode. Not a lot happens in travel. They're not making new countries on a regular basis, and when they do, it's just splitting up an old one. They're not. So a new hotel opens. Who cares, right? There's 300 hotels in New York. If there's a 301st, what are the odds that anyone who's listening to you is going to stay there? What I want to do is, I have the artwork and everything already done for it. But I may end up doing this on YouTube, to be honest, rather than as a podcast, is to use travel as a gateway to talk about geography, history, culture, and other cool things that are not travel per se. Because I know one of the things that you're really into is the miles and everything. And I talk to you, and I'm always learning something. Even though I do this as a living, I don't give a shit about planes. And I've talked to some flight gurus like Johnny Jet. I'm like, yeah, I'm flying back. Oh, what plane is it on? I'm like, I don't know. It's got wings and an engine. I don't care.
The first time I flew on an A380, it only was because a Czech Korean Airlines had a giant sign that says, "You are flying the A380."
Yeah, I don't care. It's something that I have to do to get to do the cool thing I want to do, which is in a different place. So that element of it, I know a lot of people do like that, right? They're really into the flying and the hotels and that stuff. I don't care about any of that. I truly.
Tune into our interview with Steven Seagraves last week. He's a full-on aviation geek, and his Dots Line.
And that's fine.
Podcast. Yeah.
But it's just not of interest to me.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the place and things and why is that there and the history behind it and stuff like that. So I think if I do a podcast, I'm going to be far more interested and be able to keep it up if I do a podcast that's about that and why is this cool and why is this interesting and tangentially, oh yeah, you can go visit this place, than to just be talking about travel all the time. And that's always the problem I felt with travel. Like even if you look at like the travel section of CNN or things like that, all the articles are just vapid. It's like, how many times can you write an article about how to pack a bag?
Yeah, that's what David is saying. He's wondering how travel magazines can do that stuff every month over and over.
Take your shit, put it in a bag, you're done. Maybe you pack too much stuff. Well, then you will suffer and you will learn next time. Hold it or roll it, I don't care. The volume is the same. It does, there's the law of conservation of mass. It's not really going to change anything. Here are 5 crazy hotels. This one's in a tree. This one's underground. This one's made of ice. I mean, how many times have you seen that article written?
Yeah.
It pops up all the time. And it's like, because they have nothing to write about, because it's all the same. And yeah, occasionally something, I mean, right now we're in the middle of something that's, obviously affects travel quite a bit, but the problem is it affected it in the wrong way. Nobody can travel, so we have nothing to talk about. And we're doing Facebook groups, discussions like this, because if we were actually traveling, we wouldn't have to do this.
Yeah, well, it's in the points world you mentioned, we haven't had this much news like cumulatively over the last 3 years as in the past few weeks, but we're all stressing and strategizing about stuff that we may not be able to take any advantage of, and it's like they extended my certificate this, but they didn't do that, my status this and that, and it could all become irrelevant anyway. Tudor says for your video you need shirt off. Gary, he says Gary needs more skin, but I guess he means to show more skin. So there's your
benefits from that.
Yeah.
No one. The world is a worse place. Uh, Although I should say I've dropped almost 50 pounds.
Oh, congrats. Wow.
Yeah. So, but you're just never, no, that's just not going to happen ever.
I guess the thing about a podcast, and I think I've heard you guys talk about it, is that no matter how many different channels, social media, website, it's when people run into you somewhere and recognize you, it's the podcast that they mention.
Well, because they hear your voice, right?
Yeah.
And if you took a transcription of the things we're saying right now,
Mm-hmm.
it would come across very differently. It's like when you hear a comedian tell a joke, and
Mm-hmm.
then if you try to retell it, it's not as good because you're not as good as telling it. Or if you saw it written down, it might not be funny.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of nuance that goes into seeing a person's face because that's how we're kind of, genetically bred to
Yeah.
communicate, to do it face to face with people. So I think there's a it's a lot easier to follow someone and to understand someone when you can hear their voice and especially see their face than if you're just reading someone's tweets.
Let's take a pause on the doom and gloom and the industry and think about we are traveling and I know you know about the TCC list. I assume you've had some glance at most traveled people in Nomad Mania as well, or not so
Nomad
much.
Mania is, there's a couple things I filled out, but man, it's like a job. I mean, seriously, just filling out all the forms, and I got verified, and I had to
Mhm.
show all the passport stamps and stuff, and I'm just like, do I really need to do this? I don't. It's travel. I know I was there. I don't need to prove it to anyone.
They are very earnest, and yeah, I did the UN verification and then agreed to do the territory verification without even thinking of the implications of this. The process was designed by people who have saved every receipt and
Oh yeah, like
documented
a lot of
everything.
OCD. I mean,
Yeah.
I have photos of most of the places I visited. Not all of them, but that's my proof. You can go look at my photos, and they're all original photos. And if that's not good enough for you, well, I don't care. But like the lists are like border crossings. Well, there's this border here, and then the border is between these two countries at a different place, and it's like, whoa, it's crazy. It's like, you know, yeah, well, whatever.
Let's dissect the TCC list because that we've talked about, and I like hearing your perspective on it. It's the list that so it's 300 29 territories now. It's the smaller of the three I mentioned, and it's one element of it I've liked is that there's no subdivisions in theory. So there's the idea is like why is there not extra parts of Eastern Russia? Well, there already is Russia east of the Urals and that, so it doesn't get quite as micro as some of the other lists. But that by no means it's perfect.
Um, for the most part, I don't have a problem with most of it. If you show it to someone who is not part of this community, they'll say Alaska is not a country,
Mm-hmm.
Tasmania is not a, and I get it. It's a separate physical thing, but there are some parts of it that I think are kind of stupid. I think that any island that has no permanent human population should not be listed. That would exclude Wake Island, Midway Island, and the British Indian Ocean Territory, where they kicked off the people that live there, because you can't really travel there. And if it's a travel list as opposed to just a geography list, then you start to go down a rabbit hole where why can't every speck of land? Why isn't Clipperton Island listed? It's a French territory, but there's nothing there. There's no trips there. But that's why we don't list it for the same
Mm-hmm.
reason then. And I know there's a military base on Wake, but so what? It's not there are no babies born on Wake Island who are raised on Wake Island who call themselves Wake Islanders.
Mm-hmm.
It's a transient population. And
Actually, that guy who used to get the newspaper in my building, he was born on Midway and went to elementary school on Midway. So I was like, but that's decades ago, of course, from the war, the war period. And
can he go back?
no, no, and he has no desire to. I'm like, please, do you have a connection? And
Although I
why?
saw the military history tours was thinking of doing a trip to Midway this year. And I want to go to Midway because it's the only World Heritage Site in the US that I haven't visited
Hmm.
that's super, it's almost impossible to visit. But Lord knows if it's going to happen now with, everything that's
Well,
going
before the virus stuff, they already postponed it to September 2021 because of the rat eradication. So
on. Well,
they
there you
put it
go.
up, they put it up on the site, and I paid my deposit, and within weeks they had already pushed it. So the idea is that September 2021, the rat eradication would be done. That it'd be possible to visit that, and then December 2021 would be Wake, which I was like several people listening now were booked on the prior attempt, and that was
So was I.
scrubbed. I fortunately had not left for Guam yet, but many were in Guam already.
I was signed up for it, and I was shocked. Like, oh, we don't have naval approval or the Navy Department approval. It's like, isn't that the first thing you do
Yeah.
if you're going to announce a tour? Is figure out, can we go here? Like, ask the people that run the place, is this possible? Like, I don't know. But yeah, the Midway thing, I didn't even know that they were taking deposits yet.
For both, you can put down your deposit. So supposedly I forget what plane they're planning to run, but supposedly for Midway, they've already filled one plane and we're looking at another. So now that it's pushed, I believe those who've paid deposits have the option to get their deposit back or continue it as a placeholder for and float the money for another year.
There are, I think, bi-weekly flights to Midway that the Fish and Wildlife Service runs. And I've looked into using the photographer angle to try to do that because I know some places where I could probably sell a story to about Midway. But I don't know how long I could stay in the island or what it would entail. I'm sure if you do a military history tour, you fly, you land in the morning, you see stuff, and then you leave in the afternoon.
Yeah, and as I understand it, it would need to be potentially in the middle of the night when the birds are not as crowded on the runway. So then it would be, is it two planes or two crews or how they do it? Because they would have to wait until sunset or later for the birds to clear out to take off again. So actually I didn't hear from them how they were planning to do it for this.
They are doing it on a regular basis, so
Yeah.
it's something that I think they're accustomed to. But going back to the TCC list,
maybe I should add on Midway. Yeah, I've tried every angle. I'm a member of the Friends of Midway Atoll. I've done all these things. I've said I know people like Gary Arndt who will be happy to come with me and publish stories. And there are two options that are available. One is you become a 6-month volunteer at your cost. It's not that they don't pay you; you're also covering your costs. So it's an investment of a huge amount of time as well as cost. Or they do have limited spots to do a 3-month bird counting, which is usually late December to early January. So you're missing Christmas, you're missing New Year's for a 3-week stint. Again, you're covering your costs, the government flights, and all that. So that program is available. And it's, as I understand, it's exhausting. It's quite rigorous, but it's if you want to count boobies all day, it's supposedly quite the experience to go for it. So but yeah, 3 weeks during the holidays especially is not something I can sell on the home front.
If they had a 1-month option for volunteering, I would do it.
Yeah, it's 3 weeks. No, that's the 3-week one. You just have to do it over the holidays.
No, I thought you said it was a 3-month one.
No, there's a 6-month and a 3-week. So the 3-week you can apply for. The application deadline is usually, I think, in July, and it's preference to people who have done it before. But otherwise, I've not actually gone that far to apply because the 3-week commitment over that time is not something I can do at this stage in my life. But another period, I could see myself wanting to go for it. And that is, you're there to work and you're out all day counting birds. Yeah.
I will look into that.
Yeah, go for it. Maybe you will be there. Then my excuse for trying to get a media tour has been saying that I know Gary Arndt.
I don't think that'll
all blow away. So
they'll just go, who?
Yeah. So TCC list, you were going to continue, and you were going to.
Oh, Antarctica.
Yeah.
For one, the Antarctic Peninsula has 3 different overlapping things. So if you visit the Antarctic Peninsula, it counts as 3 different entries on the list, which makes no sense. None. Second, it's based on countries' claims to Antarctica, which are all invalid because the Antarctica Treaty says no one owns Antarctica. So I don't know why you would divide it up by invalid claims, which the countries themselves are not actually making anymore. And then what about the chunk of Antarctica that no one claims? So if you visit that, you've been nowhere. So not only do you have 3 overlapping ones, but then you have a section that is nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, so it all makes no sense. And there's nothing really other than the peninsula distinguishing Antarctica, one part of Antarctica from another. Yeah, there are like some dry valleys some scientists go to, but for the most part, it's a massive ice sheet. And everywhere you look, it's just white, it's ice, and that's really all there is. And as with the islands, there's no permanent human population there. There's no one, being born, bred, and raised with a.
What about, isn't there that Chilean community on the peninsula?
Oh, they did some fake things like that where they flew
Oh,
in some pregnant women in the 70s
okay.
to boost their territorial claims.
Yeah.
But I don't think those people spent their life there.
Mhm.
They then were flown back to Chile. They did it basically as a political stunt, so they could have a more solid claim to it. That's really it. But it was not a real thing.
Let's see, CCC list is a bit ridiculous. PEI comes up, so Prince Edward Island is listed separately from Canada. So the bridge or no bridge rule, I guess.
The rule: if there's a bridge, it doesn't count as a separate thing. If we can build a bridge to Hawaii, then Hawaii will no longer be a separate entry. Maybe it made sense at one point, probably even not then. But isn't there like a distance where it has to be 200 miles or something, nautical miles separate from the mainland? And PEI has never met that criteria, so I don't even know why it was ever listed.
Yeah, so since I've been on the TCC board since last year, I did participate. They do the review every 2 years, so it's I'll say one thing certainly for it is it's not one that just constantly shifts the definitions or expands the list. There's a lot of rigor that goes into it, obsessively so. It's those that have feedback that are not based on the TCC rules. I can suggest that your feedback should be based on the TCC rules because there's a lot of, especially any Russian speaking territory seems to fill the inboxes the most. So all kinds of claims that you might be familiar with or not, and they're all fascinating and interesting, but they're argued from something separate than the TCC rules. And then of course, like any list, there's elements, no matter how much you try to make the rules fit the world, that the world doesn't always fit the rules. Certainly, like you said, a part in Antarctica where you've been nowhere, but you've been somewhere.
Yeah, and the PEI thing isn't even that big of a deal. It's easy to visit PEI. It's not hard. Many people do it, so it's not one way or the other. It's the ones that people literally can't travel to, right? Where to get to the British Indian Ocean Territory, I'm sure you've heard the stories of people that have done crazy things where they get in a yacht and they put in a call for help so that someone rescues them to Diego Garcia, and then it's like, oh, okay, we're fine. Or they step on some sand, and then it's like, oh, we visited, and then you leave. It's like, how is that any different than just being in an airport?
Yeah, I would have interest if there was and anytime I meet anybody in the U.S. military, I ask, do you have a way to get me to Diego Garcia? And I've met people who have been there in their military service, and that would fascinate me. But the sandbars and things, that doesn't, certainly not for the effort it would take.
Yeah, Diego Garcia is the only thing right now that exists in the whole territory. So yeah, I get it. It's a territory, but again, Clipperton Island, Johnson Atoll, Kingman Reef are also territories that are not on the list. So if you're going to start
Johnson, I believe, was on the list like in the 80s, and it was retired, but there's no records of why it was and then wasn't,
but
yeah.
It makes about as much sense. And there's lots of cases like that where you have something that is a territory per se, but is not listed. And so if you're going to go down that route, Rockall, that rock that juts out of the water in the Atlantic, that the UK, that's not a place for travelers. It's just a rock. That's all it is. And
That's
there,
that's half of the most traveled people list. And
but
Charles is usually watching, so I know, and he'll be our guest next week on Monday. So we'll let he and I like to trade zingers, so that'll
if
be a
people want to go there, that's
fun
fine. I know there's a company that actually, I think, takes people there like once a year or something on a trip. But if it's a travel list and the TCC list tries to be authoritative, then I think it needs to be a place you can travel to. And people can make their own lists, and people obviously do. And if you want to stick a rock on it, that's fine.
one.
But I think if for what their objective is, uh,
Mhm,
one, there should be no overlap. Two, it should kind of cover everything,
mhm,
at least continents. So the idea that you can go to a continent and not have it covered is kind of odd. And
mhm.
there should be a permanent human population there. So travelability, I just made up that word, should probably be something.
And Matt, he says his engineering company sends people to Diego Garcia quite often, but he's not in that group, sadly. And a few years ago, I almost applied for a job listing, assistant branch manager, Navy Federal Credit Union, Diego Garcia. But I remembered then that I'm also married, and I don't think the job interview was going to be there, and I don't think my wife was going to be too happy about that relocation. So,
I have landed on an aircraft carrier.
oh,
So
okay.
that's a floating island, kind of.
Were you in a plane or you just landed?
Yeah, I was invited by the U.S. Navy. I landed on the USS Harry S. Truman. I was there overnight, and then I was launched from the carrier the next day. It was really cool. One of the coolest experiences I've ever had, but not Diego Garcia.
Let's talk UNESCO sites.
All right.
You've been to a lot of them. You love them. You have been to what, over half of them now? Is that
Yep.
about right?
Few people have been to even half. There's 1,100 something now, and I've been to 403, so a third. So on most of the lists you'll find on various websites, I'm in the top 100, um,
Mm-hmm.
which is good for an American. Most of the people on those lists are European because there's
Oh
just
yeah,
so
just keep scooping
even
them up. Yeah.
yeah. If you just drove around Europe, you could visit. It's the equivalent of what the National Park Service sites are in the U.S. There's like 400 some in the U.S. and there's like
Mhm.
400 some World Heritage sites in Europe. So it's kind of similar.
Yeah, and my approach is generally, I used to travel to the UNESCO list much more than I have in recent years, but generally it would be if a country had, say, one, two, maybe three, I would make as much effort as I could in most cases to get to them all. But if it was one of these 20, 30, 40 places, then I would stop caring. And if I incidentally saw them or not based on what I wanted to see, then I wouldn't necessarily bother.
I try to do it by they tend to cluster.
Hmm.
So in February, I was in Portugal and I visited all the sites like south of Porto. So I left the northern group kind of for a separate trip where I'll go to
Hmm.
Porto and I'll visit those. But like I made a purposeful trip up to Coimbra. The university there is a UNESCO site, and then right below it, there's a monastery and a convent that's World Heritage Site. So I rented a car, visited those,
Hmm.
um, and then I realized, wow, I got an extra day, so I drove really far to the Spanish border, visited two sites out there. And so, yeah, I kind of just sort of like, well, I can visit this group and this group and this group. And if the country's small enough, you can kind of do it that way.
Hmm.
But otherwise, that's kind of how I, I look at it. There was a couple of years ago, I did a trip in where I went from, I basically followed the Allies in Europe, where I started in southern England, crossed into Normandy, then went from there all the way to Berlin. And along the way, there were two new. At one point, I'd been to every World Heritage Site in Germany, but they keep adding them. So I visited two of them that I hadn't visited before, and I just changed my route to on the way to Berlin to visit those. And I do stuff like that all the time. Same with national parks in the U.S. If I'm going to be in a city, I'll kind of like, okay, I could go do these, and I'm usually pretty good at finding efficient ways to see sites in a certain area.
Question is from Matt. A couple of the most underrated UNESCO sites that are fairly easy to get to.
Okay, it depends what you mean by fairly easy. Um,
I'll use my definition where let's see, uh, it shouldn't take.
Like you can drive
More
there.
more than like 2/3 of a day to reach it by conventional transport. How about that?
Just thinking of some European ones. We had mentioned this before, the Volkingen Ironworks in Germany. A lot of the industrial sites that you'll find, I think, are pretty cool. There's a lot like Roman ruins. Everyone knows about the Colosseum and the Forum in Rome, but then Hadrian's Villa up in Tivoli, just, it's like 45 minutes outside of Rome. Nobody's there. Like in the Villa d'Este, which was a Renaissance era, it was a villa owned by a rich cardinal. Fantastic waterworks with fountains everywhere. You will get some bus tours that go there, but Hadrian's Villa is empty and it's fantastic. You still have the original statues and stuff laying all over the place. And it was me and a handful of other people, and that we were the only people there. There are some national parks that are really fantastic. There's in Guayhanas National Park in British Columbia, there's a site called Skungwai, and it has the last remaining totem poles. That site is not easy to get to, but it's not super hard either. Once you get to the island, then it's just a matter. It's a very short float plane trip, or there are also trips by boat that can take you down there. I think that could be done in a day.
And if I recall researching that, that one by the boats are more like July, August, September.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not that there's snow or anything, but that water up there is really cold. So no matter what the air temperature is, it could be like 80 degrees or like, 30 Celsius or whatever. You are going to freeze your ass off on that Zodiac because you're going over that cold water and you really have to bundle up. And it's weird because it's really nice out. The boat starts going, you freeze, you bundle up, the boat stops, and then you can take everything off again. But it's a really great and not well-known park. And even a lot of people in British Columbia don't visit because they were telling me to fly up to, formerly the Queen Charlotte Islands from Vancouver, it's more expensive than going from Vancouver to, say, Cancun.
Yeah, Havana.
So everybody goes to Mexico or someplace else. They don't, even though it's in their own province, they don't go. Wrangell St. Elias National Park in Alaska.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
You can drive there. It's one of the few parks in Alaska you can drive to. It is the largest national park in the United States. It is bigger than Switzerland, to give you an idea. Fantastic ice field. It's part of an ice field that also includes Glacier Bay National Park and Kluane National Park in the Yukon. It's the largest non-polar ice field in the world. You can actually go glacier hiking, which I did. The Kennecott Mine is there, which was in the early 20th century the largest copper production facility in the world. And that was basically left intact. They just left everything. So the mine and all the other buildings are there, and you can get a tour of it, and it's pretty cool. So that's another one of the best national parks in the U.S., but one that not a lot of people go to. And I think there have been 2 or 3 Discovery Channel, History Channel type reality shows that were centered on McCarthy, Alaska, which is the headquarters of the park. These people that live in the Alaskan bush, and those TV shows about them that are all centered there.
Yeah, I briefly went there last September, coming down from the Denali Road Lottery Day, and instantly that was one. Denali, I could have said I'll maybe visit again, maybe not, no big deal. Wrangell St. Elias, I said, oh yeah, I need a long visit. I need a proper visit. We only had time to drive as far as that bridge on the way to McCarthy, but incredible. And that time of year was.
If you were there in September, because I was also there in September, that I was there the last weekend before the town shut down. So what they do, there's no paved roads. It's just a dirt road, literally dirt.
Yeah.
All the remaining people in town that run the restaurant and hotels, they have a big bonfire in the middle of the street, and they get rid of all their alcohol for the winter, and it's just a big party. And we got to participate. We're the last guests, and that was kind of fun.
And it seemed like the mosquitoes, which the park is famous for the swarms of mosquitoes, it seemed like by September they were a little bit reduced. Was that your experience?
Yeah, I don't remember mosquitoes at all. By early September, you should have had a couple of freezes, which should have killed most of them.
Yeah. So that seemed like if I go back, and I certainly hope to do so, I would go that first week of September, make sure that the town is still open. But incredible. And the typical rental car agencies will prohibit you from taking vehicles onto those dirt roads, but you can use car sharing services like Truro to rent a car from a local, and they wouldn't have those restrictions. Canadian national parks, there are how many? You've been to how many? And
I believe 47. So they have a slightly different philosophy from the United States. Now initially it was just like the U.S. where they just got the sexiest places in the country as parks, which is how Banff, came to be.
Mhm.
And now they're like trying to find different, environmental biomes to put a park, which means that they're oftentimes not in places that get any visitors. So a lot of their northern parks get close to zero, unless it happens to be in like Baffin Island where it gets some expedition ships. Nahanni National Park, one of the great national parks in the world. And to give you an idea of how great it is, the very first class of World Heritage Sites that were put on the list in 1978, there were 12. Nahanni was one of them alongside the Galapagos and Yellowstone.
Wow.
So that gives you an idea of what kind of place it is. It really is great, but there are no roads connecting it to the outside world, so you have to fly in.
Mhm.
And I've been touting the praises of Nahanni for years. I don't think I've made a dent in the actual visitors because it's so hard to get to. I mean, it's not easy. And a lot of Canadians I talk to have never heard of Nahanni, even though it is one of the best parks. Torngat Mountains National Park, the northern tip of Labrador, is a fantastic park. They have fjords, which a lot of people don't realize exist in North America. It's co-run by Parks Canada and local Inuit people.
Hmm.
Nutsiavut, there's Nunavik. There's a different word for the Inuit groups in Nunavut, Labrador, and Northwest Territories. Nunatsiavut, I think, is the term for the Inuit areas of Labrador. So they run it, and they have a base camp where you're at. And actually, I was just told in January by one of the Parks Canada people that they actually now have a cell signal there, and it's kind of ruined the experience when I was there. You were
Oh,
isolated the whole time, but now you can post stuff to social media. Uh,
yeah.
the camp is surrounded by electrical wiring for polar bears. I remember we went out one day in a boat. We went to the very end of this fjord, and our lunch consisted of here are some fishing poles, and we caught Arctic char, and without exaggerating, certainly the best fish I probably ever had in my life. If you've never had Arctic char, it's like salmon on steroids,
Hmm.
and was just fantastic. A really great experience. And there's a lot of great stuff, in the far north in Canada. And I think that the Canadian Arctic is poised to be the next big area for tourism. The communities there are really not set up to handle a lot of visitors, but it's, it's closer than Europe for a lot of people. It's just that people don't think to go up there. They'll be more apt to go to Antarctica because there's an industry set up to take people to Antarctica right now than Northern Canada. And that sounds kind of weird, but and even a lot of the companies that go to Antarctica in in the southern hemisphere winter, they come to the north, and most of them are doing stuff around um, Svalbard
Hmm.
or Iceland or maybe going to the coast of Greenland, but they're not going into Canada, which it seemed kind of strange to me because it would seem to be closer and easier for passengers to fly to say St. John's or something than it would be to go, all the way up to Spitsbergen or something.
U.S. national park. So let's focus on eastern half, east of the Mississippi, at least, where I think a lot of places are overlooked, but there may be quirky appeal. What are
Dry
some of the,
tortue.
and we can, all the national park sites, service sites. So
Here in the
you've
U.S., you're
got
looking
over
at
four.
Tortugas is one of my favorite, and you really have to go to Fort Jefferson. That area is going to have the best beaches in all of the Florida Keys, and
Hmm.
you can fly there, take a boat there, fly if you can because it's quicker and you get a great view of everything. Um, Next time I go there, I'm going to camp out at Fort Jefferson, which is also the largest masonry structure in North America. It was built before the Civil War as a fort to protect it against the Spanish. Never ended up being used, and it was a prison in the Civil War. And Dr. Henry, is it Seymour Mudd, I think, was the guy who treated John Wilkes Booth, was a prisoner there. And
Oh.
It's a really cool national park. We went to Acadia recently and was a bit underwhelmed. It's very commercial. There's a lot of, homes and everything. The outline of the park is kind of a patchwork, so there's a lot of vacation homes and people living up there. And Bar Harbor is very commercial, so I can see the appeal if you're in New England. It's probably one of the best things, but I don't know if it's the best. Isle Royale is really special. Does not get a lot of visitors. It's the least visited park in the continental U.S. because it's closed in the winter, which it's the only park that does that. And it's in the middle of Lake Superior, so you have to take a boat, and it's pretty much all wilderness. So your options are you visit for a few hours, or you're going to be there for a few days on a backpacking trip.
Yeah, and I was scheduled to go there last summer, and then I was already in Houghton, Michigan, and ready to drive up, and a work commitment came up, and I could not be offline that day, and so I had to abandon my ticket. But the conclusion I realized was that Michigan's Upper Peninsula is fantastic in its own right. But going back to Isle Royale, I'll take the Minnesota option because
yes,
Houghton up to Copper Harbor is a long drive, and it's a much longer boat ride.
Yeah, it's a really long boat ride, and ideally that's what you want to minimize. So do it from Grand Portage, Minnesota, and Grand Portage National Monument's also right there, and it's pretty close to Thunder Bay. If you wanted to dip into Ontario and buy Cuban cigars or something, but yeah, it's if you look at a map, you would think that Isle Royale is part of Minnesota because it's so much closer to Minnesota, but it's actually part of Michigan. And if you look at the bottom border of Michigan with Ohio, there's like a little notch. The reason why Isle Royale is part of Michigan was part of the compromise from that notch and their agreement with Ohio. That's why.
There you go. The fount of knowledge is not a site I can pick. Well, I grew up in Minnesota, but my parents are workaholics. My father's from Brooklyn, New York, so I hadn't even been to Voyageurs National Park until last year. So take another place, Boundary Waters Canoe Area, somewhere in Minnesota that I've missed, everybody's missed, and should go for.
Yeah, Voyageurs is kind of the quintessential Northwoods type park. It's a little bit different than other parks in that they allow a bit more recreational use in terms of boating and fishing. There's a cool area there called what's the name of it? Kettle Falls. And the Kettle Falls Inn, which was like this hotel resort before it became a park, and it's still there. The border, the Canadian-U.S. border snakes around. So it's a part where you can be in the U.S. and when you look south, you look into Canada. There's only a couple places along the border where Canada is south of the U.S., and that's one of them.
Yeah.
Detroit being one of the others. That's the most obvious one.
And let's see. Oh, Gary, did you ever get out to the Apostle Islands when the lake was frozen over to take photos?
No, the last several years, we had a real strong winter last year. Well, not this past winter, but the one before that. But the problem was the ice prevented people from walking out, and this year there just weren't good ice conditions. So if you join so for those that aren't familiar with it, there are these caves on the shore of Lake Superior, and when conditions are right, they basically get filled with ice inside and all these icicles, and it is really, really cool. But the conditions have to be right. It has to be an unusually cold winter because Lake Superior is really big and it only freezes around the edge. And you have to be able to walk out there. It's about a 1 mile hike to get to the caves. And so the conditions have to be right for the ice and it has to be safe. So it only happens periodically. So if you join the Facebook page for the Apostle Islands, in the winter, they post updates, like once a week or so, letting people know when it's open. And when it is open, you pretty much have to act quick to drive up there to be able to photograph it.
So on that line, there are sites around the U.S. national park sites that you either need to reserve way in advance because slots are limited, or that are very time specific. Are there a few others like that?
Well, you mentioned
planning
the Denali Road Lottery. That's a good example. So if you go to Denali, there's a 92-mile road. There's just one road in the park. And for most visitors, you get on a school bus that the park runs, and they'll take you into the park and back. You can stop wherever. But one weekend a year, they will let people drive their own cars. or a rental car, but it's a lottery that you have to apply to. You're the second person I know that actually has won the lottery. So you can do that in your own vehicle at your own leisure, and that takes place at the end of the season in the park. So that's something.
And I'll just give you a quick tip. I picked the last day of the lottery because you have to. It's not just you're drawing; you also have to pick which days. And so I picked the last day, which was like a Tuesday, figuring best chances to win. It was the last day, and a lot of the pros, and there were a lot of Alaska groups that they just enter everybody in their family and hope that somebody wins. And they had said that it's enough extra vehicles on the road compared to the few buses that the animals by the last day. It was about 5 days because there's 1 or 2 military appreciation days, and then I think 3 lottery days. That by the end, the animals are generally farther back, and so we really only saw them through really good scopes that people would let us take a peek at.
Another good one I just visited last fall is Minuteman Missile National Historic Site. So this is in South Dakota, and it is a preserved Minuteman missile site. So at the end of the Cold War, when we retired a lot of these, the treaty we had with Russia indicated that we could preserve one of these sites as a museum. So this is the one that's preserved, and it's right off Interstate 90 in South Dakota. They have a visitor center which shows it to you. But if you want to go, so have you ever seen those Cold War movies where there's Air Force guys in the bunker and they both got to turn the keys at the same time to launch the missile? So you can actually go visit that. But the problem is they can only take, I think, 6 to 8 people per tour because it's so small. It's like in an Airstream camper buried underground with a massive bank vault for a door. So it's really cool, but you have to sign up for that in advance. So I signed up for it, weeks in advance, and I had to be at the spot at the right time, and I had to drive over 100 miles an hour to get there in time because I screwed up the time zone stuff. But that's very cool, and you have to reserve a slot for that. There's a lot of other places where you don't have to necessarily do it in advance, but most historical sites, if they have a historic building, you may have to sign up for a tour at least a day in advance, maybe on the website, or once you show up, it may be a few hours in advance. I want to be in the 3 o'clock tour of whatever. Oregon Caves National Monument, you have to sign up for the tours. Jewel Cave National Monument, anything that's a cave, usually you have to do that. I think Carlsbad is not a set time. It's just going down the elevator, but I forget. Someone might want to correct me on that. But yeah, anything that's a historic building that's not huge is usually going to require it. And I'm trying to think anything else that requires like advanced preparation like that.
Carlsbad, I went last year or the year before last year, and you could walk down too, so there wasn't fixed time. I think at a certain point in the afternoon they closed the walking down option just for timing.
Katmai National Park in Alaska, basically, unlike the other remote national parks in Alaska, they have an actual camp. So they have lodging and a commissary, and you can eat and stay there. The day trip option to Katmai really isn't possible. I mean, it might be. They may offer something like that, but I don't think you'd want to do it. So you would have to look into getting accommodations or a campsite or something for Katmai if you want to do that. Katmai is where, if you've ever seen a picture of a bear eating a salmon at a waterfall, it was taken at Katmai. I can show you the exact spot it was taken at because I've taken the same photo.
Taking the same photo. When you're taking the same photo as everybody else, how do you make it a Gary Arndt photo?
I just posted on my Instagram account. That makes it. I mean, I've heard stories of guys that a guy wanted to find. So it's called Brooks Falls on the Brooks River, and they have a salmon feeding season. And this guy wanted a picture of a salmon jumping and he wanted a bear's mouth open so it looked like the salmon was jumping right into the bear's mouth, and he wanted exactly that. And well, the problem is you can't set that shot up, right? It just has to happen. And he sat there for just the longest time, until he got that one shot.
And that's what I just couldn't do. I take the shot that's in front of me and then I move on. So there's a lot of reasons why I wouldn't be a great photographer, but I take the shot and go.
There was a videographer that spent like a month in Papua New Guinea in a blind looking to get a mating dance of a male bird of paradise. And it was the first time it was ever recorded, but that's basically what he had to do.
Yeah, I remember in Christmas Island crab migration, there was a German documentary film crew, and the one guy just he had the light, I think, on the headband and the camera, and he was down in the surf with just the waves just crashing onto his face for like the 2 hours I was down there, and I thought, this is incredible dedication. I found it, so I remember at Denali all the Alaskan hardcore experts, they said the inside secret is, I believe it's the McNeil River lottery, which is a state park. So you've got to get it's through the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, and that one they for bear viewing they prize even more highly a win than getting Denali. So that's
Yeah, there's other things like if you go to New Grange in Ireland,
hmm.
it's
Oh, the
a
New Year's Day thing, right?
what
It's the New Year's Day at
the
New Grange.
solstice, the
It's
winter.
solstice, yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah.
it's this prehistoric site, and it's set up for the winter solstice. But I think like only 6 people can be inside, and there's like 20,000 people that sign up for the lottery. So, and if you win, there's no guarantee that the sun's going to be out because it's the
Hmm.
winter, and it's Ireland. It's probably going to be
Yeah.
cloudy. So, yeah, there's other things like that where it's kind of either you have to reserve it or it's a lottery type system. Um, I can't think of any lottery type system I've actually applied for. Because I just don't want to go to my way to have to be at a certain place at a certain time like that.
Yeah, and I was gonna say the travel hacker in me, the Denali one, you can transfer to other people as long as you follow their process. So I guess the way would be instead of entering, just find somebody a few weeks before that can't use theirs and get them to transfer it to you. But all right, that's fantastic. I could enjoy talking to Gary every day, all day. We're going to take a break here and welcome him back uh, soon. Hopefully, we'll be traveling even sooner, but I think that's highly unlikely. So, thank you, Gary, for tiding us over with travel info and your opinions. Thank you.